Welcome to Corks in Conversation with Heather Chavez.
I'm so excited to be talking with her today. Heather has a wonderful debut novel that came out a few months ago that we are going to celebrate today because it's a great debut. But we are also celebrating something else. It's our 100th episode.
Woohoo! I know we're so lucky that we have listeners that actually want to hear what we love to talk about, which is writing, reading, and life in between. So there you go, 100.
I know it's been an incredible journey these last, 3 seasons. We're just starting season 4, and this podcast has gotten us through some bumpy points these last few years.
Yes, we're thankful for it, but it's been a lot of fun and we've learned a lot, so that's great.
Yes, we have.
So before we begin our real celebration, let me introduce our guest for today. So we have Heather Chavez. She's a graduate of UC Berkeley English Literature program and has worked as a newspaper reporter and editor. She lives in Santa Rosa, California with her husband and children. And No Bad Deed, which we can show you here, is her debut novel. And speaking of No Bad Deed, it also got a lot of rave reviews. And so I just wanted to note a couple that are very noteworthy. First, Publishers Weekly said it's a propulsive debut. Chavez peoples her tale with credible, flawed individuals, presenting even the multiple antagonists with harrowing backstories and convincing psychological motives. I mean, this is true. And Chavez is in full command of plot and pacing. Domestic thriller fans will be satisfied. And then on top of that, we've got Lee Child, the best-selling author. Yeah, exactly. He says it's a sensational debut, compelling, hypnotic, full of suspense, and quiet menace. Don't miss it. And we agree. So, Heather, it is so good to talk to you today.
I'm so glad to be here. It's very exciting.
Welcome.
Yes.
Okay, so before we get into Heather's book, which I'm so excited to talk about, since we are celebrating both Heather's book and our 100th, we thought we'd have a little sparkling, a little bubbly in our wine glasses today, or whatever we're using. We did not consult. Usually we make a plan. So I'm curious what everybody has. I chose a La Marca Prosecco, a little Italian, and I bought one of those little bottles because I don't drink a lot of champagne. But this is my dad's favorite Prosecco, so I thought I'd pick this in honor of him.
Oh, yeah, I have had that. It's good.
Yeah, it's good.
Heather, what do you have?
Well, I live in wine country, and even though I'm not a huge expert on this subject, I wouldn't have been able to live with myself if I didn't choose a local one. So I chose a Corbel Prosecco.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
Well, guess what? We all did Proseccos. Mine
really?
Mine's La Vostra. It's an Italian Prosecco. It was only $10 total wine, and it had a pretty label. So anyway,
that checks all the boxes.
Yeah. So let's toast and see how
let's
these
do
taste.
a toast.
Okay. I didn't pour mine yet.
Okay,
All
so
right.
This is so awesome. I have just a regular wine glass, although my special one. Christy's got the actual flute, and Heather, leave it to the author, has a mug.
A Grogu mug. What can I say?
All right. Cheers.
Mine's good.
I wish I could taste Heather's though, because it's local. I bet it's yummy.
Yeah, we have a lot of yummy wines here.
Yes, you do.
That's lingo. Yummy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's high technical.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wine people.
Yeah. Well, one day we've been saying since the pandemic came, but we kept saying we've got it. We've had so many California authors that we want to go out to California and then go up to the wine country and just kind of do both at the same time in person. So hopefully one day.
Maybe
anyway,
our 200th episode will do it for
there
wine
you go.
country.
Oh, sooner than that.
Yes.
All right. So let me get to the questions.
I know.
And I have a good one.
I love Heather. This is such a great read. Here, I'm gonna hold this up. Again.
Yep. Yeah.
No Bad Deed.
Yes. So
Such
now
a good title.
Your first line in the book is, if my kids hadn't been with me, it wouldn't have happened. Great first line. And that tells us a ton about your protagonist, Cassie. She's a parent. She's badass. She acts despite being scared. She's tough. When you started writing this story, what came to you first? Was it Cassie's character, or was it the circumstances she was facing?
It was a little bit of both, mainly the circumstances. They're always kind of intertwined in my head when I'm coming up with an idea. But in this case, it was my daughter. I was picking up my daughter from after school care, and we saw this violent attack right in front of us. This 14-year-old-ish, 13, 14-year-old boy was walking on the campus, and these two other boys about the same age just jumped him. And so, yeah, and I went through this whole process. What do I do? Do I call 911? Do I get out of the car? My daughter's here, and obviously her safety is paramount. So
Yeah.
I had just a split second, though, because then they scattered as quickly as it started, it ended. And so, of course, the thriller author in me was throughout the rest of the day was like, what should I have done? What would I have done? What happened to make that, to motivate the attack? And so I just kind of told it in my head. And one of the things that came first to me was, whose story is it to tell? And in this case, I thought, I don't want to say of myself, but of someone like me. Cassie's definitely much more, can we say badass?
Yes, we can.
She's definitely more of a badass than me. And so I had to separate what I would do with what Cassie would do in that circumstance. But that first line is one of the few lines in the whole book that didn't change. It was pretty much, that was the first line. That was always going to be the first line. So it all kind of happened at the same time, though I didn't have a clear picture of what that horrible deed was that motivated the attack in No Bad Deed.
Well, the plot, it is very intricate. I was guessing constantly throughout the whole thing, and it made me wonder, about your writing process, because like you said, you had this initial idea, and I picture this room full of multicolored index cards all over the place trying to keep track of everything. But how do you do it? Did you just sit down and outline and get it that way? Or do you just kind of let it flow and hope it works out, or somewhere in between?
Definitely a plotter. It doesn't mean that I don't go off course occasionally. By occasionally, I mean quite often. But I love colored index cards. Oh, yes, they're the best.
Christie, you just nailed it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a cork board right there. You can't see it. It's empty now because I just finished the draft of my latest book, so it's waiting for the next book. But yeah, I definitely outline. I use it pretty loosely, though, because I do tend to go off track, but it keeps me so that I like to say that it keeps me like I'm still in the same state, at least. Just a road or two off, as opposed to, suddenly I'm in Iowa. So yeah, so I do try to use it as like a roadmap. But I will say my process now that I've I wrote 3 practice books, but it was different. I was younger. I didn't edit. I thought editing was checking for commas.
Right.
So I would say I've written now 3 books. No Bad Deed, Blood Will Tell's coming out next year, and then the 3rd one I just finished. And I will say it's been different for each of them, because No Bad Deed was very much, I outlined it, but then I threw it all up in the air after the first draft, because it was originally a third person, 3 points of view. And so I basically threw out 2/3 and started again. And so that was an experience. That was fun.
That's actual revision, right? That's real.
Yes. And so book 2, I wrote a book 2 that I discarded in its entirety. Apparently that's a thing I do. And then I started again with an outline, and this time it was every scene was accounted for. And it just pretty much stuck. It was pretty much stuck. There were some little detours that I realized when I was writing, as opposed to motivation, stuff like that, that I was like, oh, this isn't going to work. So I did make some detours, but it was pretty much stuck to the outline. And book 3 was kind of a hybrid. It was like I had an outline, I had the index cards, but I would take the index cards off and replace them with new ones. It was a process. Yeah, definitely with book 3. So,
Wow.
But I have to start with something. I have to know where I'm going to end up, or I will totally get lost.
You know, that scene that you witnessed at your daughter or at the school reminds me, Lisa Unger, when we had talked to her, had said that each one of her stories starts with a germ, just something that takes her down the road. And that's what that sounds like. That's so interesting and scary.
Yeah, well, it's amazing when you're looking for the dark side of human nature, how you find it. It's actually unfortunately too easy to find,
I
but
know.
yeah,
Lately.
it usually starts with a germ of something that just, ooh, what if?
Yeah.
You know?
So speaking of the dark side, one of my favorite things about your novel was no matter how heavy the circumstances got, like bad, right? So at the end of chapter 25, we'll give no spoilers away, but she just, the protagonist, she was being chased by the villain. And it was really scary, really well written, by the way. I mean, I was terrified for her. And then at the beginning of the next chapter, turn the page, just complete abject sarcasm and humor, which I loved how you intertwined those. You started chapter 26 and you had said, I had spent so much time with the police lately. I wondered if I should whip up some friendship bracelets. Like it just brought such a smile to my face. And Christie's wearing some. But I'm so curious how, I don't think that's a very easy thing to do, to keep things heavy and twisty and page turning and then add that lightness that shows so much about your protagonist.
Yeah, I will say it's a little bit easier for me to do with first person. Third person's a little bit more difficult. I did write third person in my last book, but yeah, no, it is hard because that's one of the things I really do. I love the light mood, just like that's why I have Lester and Daryl in there too, because we sometimes cope with humor. Humor is one of the mechanisms we use to get through these times. And so that's how Cassie copes, that's how I cope. Sometimes. Sometimes
that's how I cope too. It's the only way you can sometimes.
Yeah.
So it some of the authors that I love to that come to mind are like Harlan Coben, Dean Koontz, who've been writing for a while. They have those moments of like levity where it just kind of, these dark things are happening, but there's this moment where you kind of just like, have this moment to breathe. And I love that. The same with shows. Like if I'm watching a show that takes itself really seriously, I have to I can't I don't want to say binge, but kind of, I have to step away because it's, you do need those mental breaks. At least I do. So I try to give that to my readers so they keep reading.
Well, I loved it. I thought it was great. The other thing I was going to ask you about, and you mentioned it, is your supporting characters were a blast. Like, how fun was it to create these patients at the vet clinic, and her coworkers at the vet clinic were really awesome. Maybe the secretary at her daughter's school. There was you went down some really cool avenues, but I have to say Daryl was my favorite.
He was only supposed to be in one scene. He was supposed to be in the opening scene. And then he's not even in the opening scene. But he was supposed to be just a patient. But I love Daryl and I love Lester, Clumsy Labrador. And so that's an example of where I went off path a little bit. because I started thinking about, originally she was going to really she does rely on Zoe, but she was really going to rely more heavily on Zoe and her father. And I thought, well, at some point she's going to want to connect with somebody who she trusts, but also can't be necessarily connected with her. And he seemed the perfect person. And so I'm like, yay, I get to bring him back.
Yeah, he was really fun.
Yeah.
Really fun. Okay,
All
so let's take a little bit of a break. I'll take a little drink. And Heather, this is the time we have what we call the question in the bottle. We always like to ask the authors we're lucky enough to talk with a kind of question that might come up at the bottom of a bottle or after you've finished enjoying a bottle of whatever. Okay. Chris, you got a question?
Okay. Yeah. Let me see what it is.
Okay.
All right.
And you can
So-
pass, Heather, if you don't like it.
Yeah. We'll just pick another one though. What's the one movie you've seen at least 5 times and will watch again, and why?
Ooh.
Actually, I just finished watching Grease.
Ah!
Yeah,
I love Grease.
I don't even know how many times my daughter was up for a visit from Long Beach, and you know, it was funny because my husband was like, oh, okay, fine, watch it again. But you know, he was like, he was not on board. And then all of a sudden he's over on the couch just cracking up and saying, oh, wait, this is my favorite part.
Oh, that's good.
So, yeah, I've definitely watched that. I think because you know, the songs, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
there are
John
worse things
Travolta.
that can do that,
I
you know,
know.
there are worse things I could do. Is still one of my, you know, favorite musical songs. And my daughter's really, you know, into music. She's a musician, and she was also in, you know, choir when she was in high school. And so, yeah, so, you know, we kind of bond over music. And
Yeah.
Oh, I love
That
that.
movie, I tell you, I have a little bit of a short story about that movie. I remember when my son was born, so this was a long time ago. And I was just home, like from the hospital, not very long. And so all these people came over to see him, you know, and I just got, you know, after a while, he was my first. So I got kind of overwhelmed, and I'm like, okay, well, we're tired. We're going to go upstairs. So I went upstairs and just closed myself in, you know, the bedroom and turned on the TV, and what was playing? Grease. So I sat there
Oh.
watching Grease and holding my little baby boy. And it was just like, okay, I can breathe. So yeah, I like that movie too.
That's one of those movies I think that most people in a certain age bracket, right, has a memory, because I do too. My best friend growing up, who is just taking her son to college today out in California, ironically, we did a play of the movie Grease when we were like 9, and we made our parents sit down and watch us for like 3 hours.
Awesome. I love it.
Apologize, parents.
Oh, I love that.
any recordings still out there?
I don't think so. That would be at one very funny, but also painful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I digress.
So, okay.
Great answer. That was a
I
fun
wish
one
there
to think
was
about.
I wish there was a film of it.
Mm.
Our kids we filmed, but we didn't get filmed that much.
No.
So anyway, all right. So my question is, can you tell us a little bit about your publishing story? I mean, how you went from unpublished writer to having a debut published by William Morrow, and then receiving all these great blurbs from like Lee Child and Lisa Gardner. So what was your trajectory? We're always curious.
Oh, yeah.
I've always kind of written. I always knew that since my first Dean Koontz book, I knew that was what I wanted to do. So I wrote some creepy serial killer type novellas when I was in middle school-ish, early teens. And
You
so
probably weren't alone.
Probably not. And then I turned to dark poetry for a while, but
Of course.
what teenage girl doesn't go
I
through
was going
that?
to say that's a requirement. Yeah.
So I did that, and then I wrote what I call, like I said, 3 1/3 practice novels. And then
I love this. I think you're coining this phrase. I've never heard this before. Practice novel is like the best thing I've ever heard.
Well, I don't like to say trunked, because that implies like it was failure, but it really was a learning. It was learning from,
Right.
and I know there are so many authors who, not, I don't know, so many, maybe that's overstretched, but a lot of authors who can write a brilliant book and it's their first one ever. But for me, I needed the time. I needed to discover what my voice was and get used to those, learning to edit, I think was, writing, I love to do. And I think I did okay with that early on, but editing, yeah, that's something I didn't learn until I was actually an editor. Because you get so attached. And I don't think 10 years ago or before it was published that it would have been as easy to say, this isn't working. I'm throwing out 60% of my book and starting over. And so, yeah, once I got to the point where I could do that, I decided, yeah, this is one I actually want to query. So even though it seems like it happened fast, it was a process of decades of learning before it. But I queried my agent in early, actually mid-May of 2018. And then he requested a full the same day. And then I signed 20 days later, the day before my birthday.
Oh,
Birthday present. And so it happened very fast. And that's why I always say, hey, if you're querying, don't go to your second tier agents to practice, because he was always one of my top 5. And I can't imagine if I had said, oh, you know what, I'm going to practice first on other ones like I did with my books, So yeah, so we signed, we worked on it a little bit over the summer, and then it went on submission into September. And we got the preempt a week later. So, yeah.
That's great.
So a very quick process in the end, but long to begin with.
Yeah. And I appreciate you saying that, because both Cathi and I are, we met at a mystery writing conference. So we're both we're working on our first novel.
We're working on our practice
and so
novels.
we're learning. Yes, we are. We've learned so much in the process of editing and
so I'm
but
curious,
I was the
you'd
same way in
mentioned
the beginning. So
you always loved writing. How do you feel now about editing and revising? And do you see a difference between editing and revising, or do you use those interchangeably?
I kind of use them interchangeably. I love revising.
You do?
I love it. I love it. I love it. Writing, but revising. I'm actually doing line edits on my 3rd manuscript. And it's my favorite thing to look at that sentence and say, okay, does that work? Even though I feel like I have a very simple style. It's not like I'm, densely lyrical, narration. It's just pretty straightforward. But I just, is the pacing right here? I love that. I love it. Yeah, I do.
Well, that's an excellent attitude.
Yeah. So
that makes me happy.
I will say I love it more when I get it closer to right the first time.
Yeah.
I have to throw out 2/3 of my book or a whole book. Not as much fun.
Right.
I imagine not. Okay, so if there is such a thing, what's your average writing day like?
Well, it's different now. I recently started a pretty demanding day job. Well, I've always worked, but I mean, this one's work, a lot of work. And I love it, but it does require a certain commitment, level. And so I've had to get really disciplined. This answer would not have been the same, 6 months ago. It would have been, I write whenever I can, and I squeeze it in mornings and nights and weekends. That's still true, but I do have to be more regimented about it now. So I pretty much, wake up at 5:50, take a walk, and then spend about an hour and 15 minutes writing, or editing or plotting, anything creative, I just, depending on what stage I'm at. And then I work. And then I usually don't have time again to do it during the weekdays. And then on the weekends, sometimes I put in 3 hours, sometimes I put in 12 hours, really depends on my mental bandwidth, but I do have to write every single day, because I average probably about, on creative, whether it's, writing, outlining, editing, whatever, I probably average about between 25 and 35 hours a week. in addition to working probably 45 plus hours at my day job. And so I really have to I have to be pretty dedicated, because otherwise I'm going to just miss a week and suddenly, boom, I'm out of the habit. So
yeah, that's what we found too. We got kind of out of the habit with things. And so we're in the about to, you have to do it every day, right, Cathi? It's not easy.
it's
Mhm.
You know, I think to stay in that space, that imaginary creative space, I need to touch it every day. And when you don't, which I've seen in these last few months, it's painful to get back. It's like being out of shape and trying to get back into exercise.
Which is a whole nother story. I need to do that as well.
That's what it feels like to me, at least. So
yeah, that's a good analogy.
Yeah. So what I always want to ask is what is right today for you? What's the best part of the writing life?
honestly, I would say the community is definitely it, because I mean, like I said, my next book's coming out next year, and that there are readers out there who are excited about my next book. And I'm like, whoa, that's new, so that's exciting.
We're excited.
Yeah.
I'm excited for it too, but I should be. But so, when I wrote No Bad Deed, I fully intended that nobody was going to read it but my family. And so this one, I know it's going to be read by people, and that's kind of an experience. But it's been the reading community and the writing community. Writers have just been it's such a generous community, like
I think we think it's mystery writers in particular, or crime fiction writers in particular.
It's hard to say, because I that's who I interact with most. But like Lee Child and Lisa Gardner, they didn't have to read my book. They didn't have, that's a commitment.
Right.
They definitely have better things to do than read, this new debut that they don't even know.
Well, now once they read it,
yeah,
it was a good thing for them.
So it was a gift.
Yes, exactly. You gifted them with your book.
Yeah, and I'm part of a 2020 debuts group, which I think we are closer than a lot of debut groups, because 2020 was not a good year for that.
No.
But it's writers are just they're so willing to support and help, and I wrote No Bad Deed in a bubble. I didn't have writer friends. I didn't have critique partners. I didn't have beta readers. I had one friend who read that first third person draft, and I had a conversation with her. Should I go this first person and single it? And so I did have feedback from her, but other than that, I wrote in a bubble. So it's so stressful. This industry can be tough. And so having the support of both readers and other writers has just been amazing to me.
Lovely.
Yeah,
that's lovely.
And people like you. It's just to talk about books. People who love books are wonderful people.
Yes.
There's some bad ones out there.
That's true. That's true.
Anyway, so before we go, we do have one final question that we like to ask. It appeases our mysterious foodies out there. And we ask all our authors, so which of your characters would you like to share a meal with, and what would it be?
Oh gosh. From No Bad Deed.
Can be any of your books.
Yeah, well, because I don't feel like Cassie has time to eat. She just does not have time to eat.
She's like gonna be a fast food on the road kind
of. Frankie from My Blood Will Tell. She's more of a cook, even though she does eat pretty casual because she's a single mom. So she has a lot on her plate. I think it would be with Frankie, and I think it would be she makes chilaquiles in the book, which is something my husband has made for me on occasion. And she also eats pizza. I'm okay with you.
Either one.
What are chilaquitas or chilaquitas?
It's like fried tortillas, and it's really good. It's
okay, so that's one of our stops in California.
Yeah, it's really.
Heather Chavez's husband is going to make us some
Oh, you know, he makes really great. He makes the best pozole. He totally does. There's a reference to that in the book too.
Wow.
I realized how much my husband's cooking has inspired this book.
Wonderful.
So, yeah.
Sounds like you got a good one.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so Heather, when our listeners want to know more about you, where should they go online and find you?
You can find all my social media links, all of them, 3 of them, are on my website, which is heatherchavez.com. So if you remember my name, that's the easiest way. But I'm most active. I mean, I'm on Facebook, Instagram.
Bookstagram.
The same. Cat pictures and books. What else do you need?
What else do you want in life? Maybe some food.
Yeah, and wine. I mean, come on, we're good.
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, so I'm on both of those as IAM HR Chavez.
All right. We will
Okay.
have that in all of our posts too and share that on our.
Yeah, we'll share the links on our posts. All right. So, I mean, this has been a great conversation. We're so glad you joined us. And I guess all we have to do is say cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. And happy 100th.
Thank you.
Cheers. This is a good prosecco.
I just choked on my ice cube that was in my prosecco, but yes.